Hello and welcome to another episode of Drafting Notes, the sister podcast of Page One, where we like to take a look at a specific issue that has been bothering us or given us trouble, and we talk it through and hopefully help you with the same issue if you're tuning into this. And we've had a couple of episodes recently. We did one about how to write your query letter, how to find how to find agents generally and stuff like that. But part of that package, as well as the pages that you have to send, which are definitely the most important part of the whole thing, I think, is the dreaded synopsis.
Yeah.
The thing that no one wants to do. Well, actually, we've been interviewing agents recently, and they don't even want to read them, really.
It does seem especially cruel, right? You've written an 80,000 word book. Now summarize that in 1,000 words or 300 words. Right? It's not an easy task. Yeah.
I saw one the other day that was like, give us a 200 word synopsis. It's like,
that's brutal.
What are you talking about?
I mean, you have to make some pretty big choices about what you're leaving out, I think, if you're doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it is a thing that is necessary, and I think even learning the skill to write a synopsis can be useful for even when you are an established author. If you're pitching your next book or whatever, they might want something up front, something like that as well. Yep. So it can be useful for that. And even if you're a planner, especially, but even if you're not, if you learn the skills of this, then it can help you with the writing of your book if you sort of work on it beforehand as well.
Right. It does almost kind of, I think, I agree with that in terms of the planning of it. A synopsis can almost kind of crystallize, I think, to you what the book is actually about and what the themes actually are and the conflict. Because I think sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you're mired through. You're trying to plan it and write it and make the prose nice at the same time, and it's easy to get lost. I think having a synopsis that just says, oh, actually, these are the themes I need to keep going, these are the conflict I'm building towards, it can be quite a nice reminder. So yeah, I guess there's other uses for sure than just submitting to an agent.
Yeah, I think so. And so, I mean, maybe we should start with what a synopsis isn't, which a synopsis isn't your blurb or back of book copy. You're not, you must never, if someone asks for a synopsis, they're not asking you to leave them on a cliffhanger.
No teasing.
No, exactly. It's a summary of the whole story, beginning, middle, end. And I think because of that, and because you're condensing an 80,000 word book, or in the case of, sci-fi fantasy, you're condensing a 150, 200,000 word book sometimes. You're only, you don't need to write it in the voice that you've written the book in. Yep. You don't need to write it with, perfect prose. I mean, obviously you want to write it well, but it's more of a technical document. Yeah. It's more to show the agent or editor, here's what the story, you've got my sample chapters, here's what the story is, here's where it goes, and it's to show that you have a sense of the structure and the through line and the themes of your novel. I think.
And I think you have to be quite specific about what you pick to put in and what you pick to leave out. And I think if you've got, especially as you say, if it's like a big sci-fi fantasy novel where you've got probably a lot of subplots, a lot of characters, but even if it's a more kind of standard sized novel, I would always go for the main protagonist, their main central conflict, their antagonist, their resolution, what their arc is. I wouldn't worry about most of the subplots, most of the minor characters. Only the things that kind of really directly impact the main story, that's what I would put in and keep to that, what is the main thrust of it. And I think people always know there's going to be other characters and subplots that maybe show theme and stuff, but that's not important for this.
I think that's where it can be very difficult, because sometimes you might have a subplot that very cleverly sort of weaves into the main plot, and involves a side character that weaves in. And that's brilliant in the main book, but in the synopsis, that might literally be a sentence or two, that you're just saying, the main character, this happens, and then they discover this. And that discover this is that whole side plot, essentially.
Yeah.
But you're having to condense it down into such, like I say, sort of simple technical language, but you're wanting the agent to understand where the story is going, what happens to the protagonist, what is the through line or the spine of the story. I think that's the main thing.
And I think you want to look at when you've selected your plot, you've got the plot that you want to tell, the main story, and I think as important as plot is, your character is almost as important, I think, for the synopsis, because you're wanting to show who the character is, why it's his story, what makes it, how the inciting incident at the start impacts him directly, what causes him to go off on his journey or her journey, and then what happens to them throughout the book. What changes happen to them? What does the plot do to them? What do they do to the plot? How do they turn around? How do they adapt? What's their arc? What's their resolution? How are they changed by the events of the story? I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And and the other thing, I know I said this at the start, but the thing is, you put the ending in there. Put what happens.
It feels weird doing that, right?
It does, because you're sort of spoiling it up front, and you don't want to do that. And there are some agents that will only glance at a synopsis and sort of, they're only going to glance at it to see, does this person know where they're going with this story?
Yeah.
And they can be satisfied by scanning over it very quickly and going, yeah, okay, there is a story here, I'll request the full thing or whatever. Others may look at it in more detail and decide whether or not that's the story they want. But that's why you have to put all these bits in it. And I think go for clarity over style. You want to make it clear what is happening in the story step by step. And I'll give an example of mine. My books often have a tool, a technique that I like to use is to have some flashbacks throughout the book, to sort of expand out on normally the main character's story, and to do some reveals. And I try and drop those in at times that fit the main timeline, if you like, so it sort of mirrors that or bounces off that or reveals something about that. Now, that's great, but in a synopsis, what I tend to do with that is simply say, I might have one line, if I include it at all, but I might have one line that says, through a series of flashbacks, we learn X, and that's it. I don't try and say, right, this happens, and then there's a first flashback, and then this happens, and then there's another flashback, and then this happens, and then there's another flashback. It's not. It might help you, if you've never written a synopsis before, to condense each chapter into a single sentence to begin with. That might be a starting point.
Yeah, I can see
but
that.
It's not what you want the final thing to be. It's not, because you're giving too much detail there, and you're giving too much. You're not giving that clarity that I think you need to show what the story actually is at that point.
Yeah, I think clarity, that's the key word for me. That is what I always try to keep in mind when I'm writing a synopsis, is that I want it to be an easy breezy read, 1-2 pages max. I want it to take them like a minute to read through it. I want it to be clear, concise. I want to have lots of white space in the page. I don't want it to be packed densely, filled with text. And as you say, I think the way that agents look at it is that, okay, I've read the chapters. I like the opening chapters. The query letter has a nice blurb. That's got a nice wee blurb to it, the wee tease of what the book's about. It's giving me an idea of the feel of it, and who they are as a person, as a writer. The synopsis is this book going off the rails? Is it going where I think it's going to go? Are there some surprises in store? Do they feel like they can plot a book properly, and they can write a book, and they know how to do twists and character revelations and arcs, etc.? Does it feel like or do I read it and think, oh wow, this is after chapter 4, it goes somewhere completely different, and it becomes a different type of story, and I don't like that. So so I think it's much more of a quick roadmap. And I agree with you that there's probably not very much we put an agent off, unless it's a really bad synopsis, or it's unexpected, or it doesn't, or the, if the first few chapters have landed, I think you'd have to do something pretty bad with the synopsis for that to put them off. So I think as long as you keep it clear, keep it like a technical, 100% technical. That is the way to think about it. And what I like to do is I will often put my character names in bold.
Yes,
first time I
that's a
use
good
them.
idea, yeah.
Just to like again help with that clarity, but like here, so they pop a little bit. And if they get down, they say, "Oh, who's Jimmy again?" "Oh, Jimmy was the cop," but right, I mean, again, you shouldn't have too many characters. I think you should probably limit it to like as few characters as you need to for the synopsis.
Definitely.
Your main character, your protagonist, a couple of side characters perhaps, but I really no more than that, I don't think. But yeah, I think you double spacing, 1.5 line spacing, lots of white space.
Well, actually, I'm going to stop you.
Please do.
Because often synopsis, obviously when you're doing a submission or a query, your main pages have to be double spaced.
Yes,
but
that's a good point.
A synopsis doesn't need to be.
No.
So if always read their instructions. But normally,
that's true.
A synopsis does not need to be double spaced. It can be single spaced. So when they're talking about a 1 to 2 page, some will give a word count, but if it's a 1 to 2 page or whatever,
that's
it's a 1 page.
Single space. So you've got a lot
single
to play
space. So that gives you more to play with. It's when they give you a specific word count that you're getting.
Those are tricky. Yeah, we've got 300 words, max. That is trickier, and I think it is. You really have to be really picky about what you leave in and what you leave out, I think.
What I find is a useful exercise, and this is the only way that I can really write synopses, is, I'll start and I'll do my draft, and normally that is like 2, 3, maybe 4 pages, possibly even. And then you just start honing it down, and you start doing your editing that you would do in your normal, say, right, well, I could condense that, and you'll start cutting it down, and you'll start honing it down, and then you'll end up, hopefully, eventually, with a version that is, say, maybe a couple of pages, and you go, okay, well, I'm quite happy with that as a 2-page synopsis. So there's your 2-page synopsis. If you're allowed to send a 2-page synopsis and you want to, then you've got that. Then you just keep going. So you end up with a few versions of the same synopsis. Which
is not a bad thing to have in the bank, is it?
Exactly. So because a lot of agents want different lengths of synopses.
Yeah.
So you, in doing that exercise, you are giving yourself that range that you can decide. Although what I will say is that often the best one is the last one. Your shortest one, your tightest one is often the best one.
I totally agree with that. I think it's even as an exercise to practice. I think it is interesting when you get it down to that kind of 300 words, or whatever that tight one. When you manage to get it, it really, really makes you realize actually all the stuff that I thought was important in the 2-page one wasn't important. Like all the stuff that I thought, well, I have to have this line in because otherwise how will they know this happened, and I have to explain who this guy is because otherwise this makes no sense. You don't need any of it. You can probably cut all of it out, and you can really drill down to just pure character motivation, pure plot. You're simplifying it to the absolute max. It's not about nuance. It's not about subterfuge or like tone or shadow. It's just about what is the bare. This has happened, so this happens, and then this happens, and then the end, and then it's very satisfying. I think when you're able to condense it and you realize actually this is the 300-word block of what it is. And what I often like to do is, and loads of websites have this. You can find resources online. People have done synopsis of famous books or films, and you can see, okay, if it's a book that you've read and you know well, and you see the synopsis of that book being done in 1,000 words, in 500 words, whatever, you think, oh, actually, you're right. There's whole subplots don't need to be mentioned. Whole characters I can leave out, and it still gets a gist of what Alice in Wonderland or whatever the book is. It still gets a gist of it down there. So I think that's a really good, useful tool to do. Is go and read other synopses of famous books.
I mean, I also want to make clear that no one enjoys writing these things. It doesn't matter whether you're Stephen King or just starting out.
Horrible.
Like these are horrible things, and the other thing is that agents generally know that, and they know it's a horrible exercise to do. And I think, going back to what we were saying about being rejected because of the synopsis, I think if it's a good agent, if they generally won't reject if the synopsis isn't perfect.
That's right. I agree with that.
They're just looking for does this story, is this a story that I would want to read?
Yeah.
Does it hold up? Does it seem to hold up in terms of plot beats or character or whatever? And if so, then I'll give it a chance and I'll get the pages and I can decide at that point. They're not making a final decision based on the synopsis.
No, and no agent is signing an author for their ability to write a synopsis.
No.
They're signing an author because the book they've written is good. This synopsis is a tool to showing you understand it, to save time for them to say, well, is the rest of the book going where I think it will go? Yes, it is. I'll read the rest of it. If it's going somewhere different, it's becoming a book I don't like, I'll pass. I agree. Even a mediocrely written synopsis, I don't think it's going to put many agents off, because that's as you say, they understand it's not a nice thing to write. It's not creative at all. It's very, very different from the book. And as long as those opening chapters are good and the synopsis is good enough to show where the book's going after that point, I think you'll be fine. So don't stress it too much.
And if you do that thing of writing, because I think what I've started doing now is I'll start a book, and have a vague, I am more of a planner than you, I think. So I'll have battered out some sort of outline, at least to some extent. But when I'm partially through a book, I do like to sit down and try and see, right, can I now do a synopsis of some kind? And it can show you the weaknesses in your story as well. It can show you that, that isn't going to work because of this or whatever. And it can give you clarity of thought, and you can say, all right, okay, this is where I'm wanting to get to, and I can now see the path through that because I've written this synopsis. Yeah. And obviously you can change the synopsis at the end because your story will probably change in the writing and stuff like that. But it helps set you on that path. It helps give you those guardrails, I think, if you're doing it beforehand, which I do think is or during. I think it's quite useful.
I definitely find that often I don't really know, because I kind of jump into something probably without doing enough planning to start with. I kind of don't know what the book's about until I've done maybe the first 5,000-10,000 words, and I kind of think, okay, actually, the book's actually about this, or I've worked out what the theme might be, or what type of, or it's more of a horror, or it's more of a magic, or whatever the world is. It takes me a while to get to grips with what it is, and I have to kind of start writing a little bit of it. And I actually think that point would be a nice point to pause and do a synopsis, because I can see that being a really good tool. It feels like planning, but you can almost trick it. It's not like, it is planning, but it's not the boring planning that my brain hates. It feels like a different type of exercise. In
the case of, I think maybe once you're signed or whatever, you maybe don't need them as much. But if it's someone that's trying to find an author, find an agent or whatever, you're going to have to do it at some point. So, doing it at that stage, at that middle stage, maybe can help you. And you've sort of, even if it's only a rough one, it helps you when you get to that stage at the end that you're trying to sort of hone it and make it better. So, to sum up, synopses are horrible things. But they are necessary, unfortunately, and they can, I think, teach you a lot about your own story as well. So, and there is, I do think, although they are horrible, they do, I don't want to say they get easier, but you understand what you're trying to do with them more the more of them
they
that
do.
you do.
And because they are technical, because they do follow, there is a format that you can roughly follow, right? It is, it is the same thing you're doing every time. It's the same exercise you're doing every time in terms of stripping something down to its bare parts and working out what you need to tell the synopsis. So they do get easier, because I think you start to realize as you're writing it what would form the synopsis, and that almost and the synopsis, even if you haven't written it down, I think is in your head a little bit in terms of informing you where the story's going. So I think they do form a really important part of it. And as you say, not just finding agents, but pitching books down the line, etc. You will always be having to do synopsis to pitch for a work and to try and sell something. So yeah, it is an important, horrible tool that you must learn.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, hopefully we have given you some helpful info. And what I would say is that, like, there are, like you were saying, go and look at the synopses of famous stories, but also there are so many resources online that you can go and find. And some people have different sort of not templates, but structures that they like to use for synopses as well,
Yeah.
and they can help you sometimes. So they might not be for you, but have a look about. There's plenty of information out there about them. And the other thing I would say, the final thing I'm going to say before we wrap it up, is if you have someone that you trust. I know you won't want to if they're also going to be reading your book or whatever. Maybe give it to someone else potentially if you're not wanting to spoil the book or whatever. But someone else casting their eye over it can be good, because it can just, you can be too close to it. You can maybe assume knowledge in your synopsis that isn't there, that isn't clear on the page. And so if someone else casts their eye over it, then they're going to point out any, I didn't understand this bit, or where did this come from?
And they don't have to be a writer. They just, because it's purely, does this make sense? Does this, do you understand? Or is this, because as you say, there'll be tons of stuff that you haven't put in that makes sense to you, but it's not on the page, or you've put extra stuff in that's not necessary. And I think sometimes that independent view can be really helpful. Yeah.
So we hope this helps. If you've used this video as procrastination from writing your synopsis, then you can go back to it now. But no, we hope it helps. And as ever, these drafting notes episodes are up on our Patreon. I'm never sure how to say it.
I'm never sure the word.
They're up there early. You get early access to these on there, and then they're eventually released onto our main podcast feed, the Page One podcast feed, and our YouTube channel as well. So if you're watching it on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think about synopses, and we'll be back soon with another drafting notes.
See you later.